Only fools chase the horizon, they say. But our excitement drowned out the warnings. As the waves crashed around us, we ventured further into the heart of darkness, unaware that something far more sinister was waiting just beneath the surface. The thrill of adventure bubbled inside us, urging us on as we set sail on our creaky old boat, the Sea Whisperer. It was a night thick with fog, the kind that seemed to swallow sound and light alike. The moon hung high, shrouded behind clouds, casting an eerie glow over the water. We laughed and shouted, our voices mixing with the wind, thinking nothing could possibly go wrong. We were young, invincible, and ready to embrace whatever the night had to offer. As we sailed deeper into the Atlantic, the air grew heavier, a palpable weight that pressed against our chests. I glanced back at the shore, which had faded into a ghostly silhouette. A creeping unease settled in my stomach, but I brushed it aside, blaming it on the unfamiliarity of the ocean. My friends, Mark, Sarah, and Jake, were too busy sharing tales of legends and myths to notice my hesitation. "Did you hear about the phantom ship that appears in these waters?" Mark asked, his voice laced with mockery. "They say it's cursed, doomed to sail forever in search of lost souls." We all chuckled, but I could see the flicker of fear in Sarah's eyes. She always had a knack for sensing when things were off, a trait I'd come to respect over the years. We continued to drift, lulled by the gentle rocking of the boat. The fog grew thicker, swirling around us like a living thing, obscuring our view of the horizon. I leaned over the edge, peering into the dark depths of the ocean, wondering what lay beneath. The water seemed to ripple ominously, as if something was watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike. Suddenly, a distant glow pierced through the fog, flickering like a lantern in the night. My heart raced as I pointed it out to my friends. "Look, what is that?" Mark squinted into the distance, his bravado fading. The glow danced just out of reach, and a chilling wind swept through the air, sending shivers down my spine. "It's probably just a lighthouse," Jake suggested, though I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. We all exchanged glances, the thrill of adventure now tinged with dread. The glow began to pulse, drawing us in like a moth to a flame. Against my better judgment, I found myself steering the boat toward the haunting light. As we approached, the glow revealed itself to be a ship, large and ethereal, its sails tattered and glowing with an otherworldly sheen. It seemed to materialize out of the very fog itself, an ancient vessel frozen in time. I felt a chill race down my spine as the realization hit me. This was no ordinary ship. We were staring at the legendary phantom ship of the Atlantic. "We should turn back," Sarah urged, her voice trembling. But the allure of the ghostly ship was too strong. It beckoned us closer, and before I could think twice, we were drifting alongside its hull. I could see figures moving aboard, shadowy and indistinct, their forms merging with the mist. A deep sense of foreboding washed over me. "Let's take a closer look," Mark said, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. I hesitated, but the idea of missing out on something extraordinary pulled me along. The boat creaked as we drew nearer, the sounds of the ocean fading into an eerie silence that seemed to envelop us. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but the temptation was too strong. As we edged closer, I noticed the ship's name, barely legible on the bow. The Elysium. It sent a shiver down my spine. Legends whispered of this vessel, said to be crewed by spirits who lured sailors to their doom. A gust of wind surged, rattling the sails of our boat, and I felt an undeniable urge to step aboard the ghostly ship. "What are you waiting for?" Mark grinned, already climbing onto the creaking deck of the Elysium. I glanced at Sarah, her face pale and frightened. But before I could voice my concern, she too was pulled along by the ghostly allure. Reluctantly, I followed, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. The moment I stepped onto the ship, the air shifted. It felt charged with energy, as if the spirits of the crew were watching us. The deck was slick with moisture, and the fog swirled around our feet, swirling like wisps of smoke. I could hear whispers carried by the wind, incomprehensible yet chilling, and I felt a deep sense of unease settle in my bones. "Look at this!" Jake exclaimed, his voice echoing in the fog. He held up an old tarnished compass that seemed to spin wildly, the needle refusing to settle. "It's like it's trying to tell us something." I frowned, feeling a chill creep down my spine. There was something deeply unsettling about this ship, something that felt ancient and malevolent. Suddenly, the deck creaked ominously, and the whispers grew louder, rising to a cacophony of ghostly voices. I felt a sense of urgency wash over me. "We should go back," I urged, glancing nervously at my friends. But my words were drowned out by the rising wind, which howled through the rigging like a lament for the lost. The fog thickened, wrapping around us like a suffocating shroud. Mark was examining the ship's interior, and I could hear him call out excitedly, "Guys, come look at this!" I felt a surge of fear as I followed him below deck. The air was stale and cold, filled with the scent of salt and decay. Shadows danced along the walls, casting sinister shapes that sent chills racing down my spine. The cabin was filled with old sea charts, their edges frayed and yellowed with age. They depicted routes long forgotten, leading to islands that were said to be cursed. As I examined them, I felt a presence behind me, and I turned sharply, heart pounding. Nothing, just shadows. Yet the feeling of being watched lingered, an invisible weight pressing against me. "This place is incredible," Mark declared, his enthusiasm unfazed by the oppressive atmosphere. I shot him a warning look, but he was already delving deeper into the ship, drawn by the promise of discovery. I exchanged a worried glance with Sarah, who seemed equally unsettled. "We need to get out of here," I whispered. But our words were lost in the eerie silence that enveloped us. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, throwing us off balance. I grasped the edge of the table to steady myself, panic rising in my chest. The wind howled through the cabin, and I could hear the creaking of the wood, as if the ship itself was coming alive. Shadows flickered around us, whispering secrets that sent chills through my bones. "What was that?" Jake shouted, his voice shaking. "Did you feel that?" I nodded, fear clawing at my throat. The ship seemed to shudder beneath us, a low growl emanating from its depths. "We need to leave," I insisted, my heart racing. But as we made our way back to the deck, the fog thickened, swirling around us like a living entity. On deck, the atmosphere had changed. The ghostly figures I'd glimpsed before were now more defined, their faces twisted in agony, eyes hollow and soulless. They reached out to us, their hands clawing at the air, desperate and menacing. A chill raced through me, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread settle into my bones. "Get back!" I shouted, pulling my friends closer as the spectral crew began to emerge from the shadows. They looked like sailors from another time, their clothes tattered and soaked with the sea. The whispers grew louder, now forming words that sent shivers down my spine. Stay with us, forever. We have to go, Sarah screamed, her face pale with terror. We stumbled back, trying to find our way to the edge of the ship. But the mist thickened, swirling around us and obscuring our vision. The figures moved closer, their expressions twisted in a mix of sorrow and rage. It felt like we were trapped in a nightmare with no way out. We raced to the edge of the ship, but the water below roiled violently, as if it were alive and hungry. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced back at the spectral crew, their eyes burning with an insatiable hunger. They were no longer just shadows. They were the manifestations of despair, drawing us into their world of eternal torment. In a desperate bid, we scrambled back onto our boat, hearts racing as we fumbled with the ropes. The Sea Whisperer felt like a lifeline, a fragile barrier between us and the malevolent spirits. I glanced back at the phantom ship, which seemed to pulse with a sinister energy. The crew now in a frenzy, reaching for us with desperate hands. "Start the engine!" I yelled, my voice barely audible over the howling wind. Jake scrambled to the controls, but the engines sputtered. Refusing to cooperate, panic surged within me, and I glanced back at the phantom ship, which loomed larger, as if it were closing in on us. The spectral crew surged closer, their faces twisted in rage. Come on, I screamed, my heart racing. The wind whipped around us, and I felt a surge of power from the ship, a dark energy that seemed to draw me in. I fought against it, trying to focus on the task at hand, but the whispers grew louder, drowning out my thoughts. Stay with us, forever. Suddenly, the engine roared to life, and I felt a rush of hope. We're moving, Jake shouted, relief flooding his voice. But just as we began to pull away, the phantom ship lurched toward us, its crew reaching out with ghostly hands, desperate to claim us as their own. I felt their icy fingers brush against my arm, sending a jolt of terror through my body. The fog closed in around us as we sped away, the figures now a blur in the mist. I could hear their screams mingling with the wind, a chorus of despair that echoed in my mind. We pushed the boat harder, fighting against the waves that threatened to drag us back. Every instinct screamed at me to keep going, to escape the clutches of the cursed ship. But as we sailed further into the fog, the world around us began to change. The ocean roiled beneath us, dark and turbulent, the waves crashing violently against our boat. It felt as if the very sea was alive, angry at our intrusion. I glanced back, the phantom ship fading into the mist, but the fear of its return gnawed at my insides. "We made it!" Mark yelled, his voice tinged with relief, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Something deep within me knew that we weren't safe yet. The fog pressed against us, suffocating and heavy, and I could sense that the spirits of the ship were still lingering, watching, waiting for their chance to reclaim what they had lost. The night dragged on, the fog refusing to lift. I felt a sense of unease settle over us, a tension that seemed to grow with each passing moment. The ocean was eerily quiet, and I could see nothing beyond the swirling mist. My heart raced as I scanned the horizon, half expecting the ghostly ship to reappear at any moment. Hours passed, and the fog began to thicken once more. Panic surged within me as I realized we were trapped, the ghostly ship's curse still haunting us. What if it follows us? I whispered, glancing nervously at my friends. They looked equally frightened, and I could see the fear etched on their faces as the weight of the night pressed down upon us. Just then, a flicker of light appeared in the distance, cutting through the fog. My heart raced with a mix of hope and dread. "What is that?" I asked, my voice trembling. We turned toward the light, the tension palpable as we drifted closer. Our boat moving steadily toward the glow. But the closer we got, the more I felt the weight of the spirits closing in around us. The light revealed itself to be another ship, but something felt off. It was old and weathered, with tattered sails that fluttered in the wind. The crew was obscured in shadows, their faces hidden from view. My heart sank as I recognized the signs of the cursed vessels that roamed these waters, forever doomed to drift in search of lost souls. "Turn back!" I shouted, panic rising within me. But it was too late. The spectral crew began to emerge from the shadows, their hollow eyes fixed on us with an insatiable hunger. I felt the boat lurch beneath us, as if the very ocean were conspiring against us. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices begging us to join them. In that moment, I understood the truth. We had not escaped the Elysium. The spirits had followed us, bound by their curse, determined to claim us as their own. "We're not safe!" I screamed, and my friends echoed my fear, their faces pale and terrified. The crew of the new ship moved closer, their forms twisting and contorting in the dim light. I frantically searched for a way out, but the fog closed in around us once more, wrapping us in its suffocating embrace. I could see the spectral crew reaching out, their hands clawing at the air as they drew closer. "We have to jump!" I shouted, desperate to escape the fate that awaited us. The boat was rocking dangerously now, the spirits closing in. Without a second thought, we leapt into the water, the icy waves crashing around us as we struggled to stay afloat. I could hear the whispers rising above the chaos, calling out to us in a chilling chorus. "Join us! Stay with us!" Panic surged within me as I fought against the tide, desperately trying to keep my head above water. Just as I thought I had escaped, I felt a cold grip on my ankle, pulling me down into the depths. I screamed, the darkness closing in around me, and I felt the weight of the spirits dragging me into their world of despair. As my vision faded, I caught a glimpse of my friends, their faces twisted in terror before everything went black. Would we become the next lost souls at sea, forever wandering the fog-shrouded depths of the Atlantic?